First of all, I'd like to First of all, I'd like to let you know that the South Carolina Middle Grades Initiative sponsors these webinars. We have partnered with them for about 4 years now and are really fortunate that they continue to fund us and believe that the work that we are doing grows disciplinary literacy in South Carolina. So tonight's webinar features Mary Starr as the executive director. She's of the Michigan Math and Science Leadership Network and a leader of the Disciplinary Literacy Essentials Initiative in Michigan. She has authored textbooks and provides NGSS professional learning and leadership support across Michigan and the United States. At the moment, Mary is the co-primary investigator on an NCF grant, and it's called Learning in Places. When she's not organizing, writing, or providing learning opportunities, she can be found working in the trenches with other science teachers in their classrooms. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. That was so nice. I wonder where those words came from. I'm really excited to be here. I'm hoping that enough folks are going to be able to interact a little bit and look at some lessons with us. So one of the things that I would really like to do today, and I encourage you to do in your places, is to use the ideas of today to look at some sample lessons that'll help to see instantiations of disciplinary literacy in science in some recently developed curriculum materials. Is it okay if I just get started? Awesome. Okay. So I was talking to a friend about this meeting, and she mentioned that when she thinks about disciplinary literacy, she likes to connect it to something everyone has experiences with. And she said, driving a car. So if you wouldn't mind, could you think about what are the literacies that you need in order to drive a car? If we think about safely driving a car as a discipline, right? What are the things that you need to have in your tool belt in order to be safe? Anybody can drive a car. It's the safe part that's important, right? It's with the literacies are needed to do it safely. So if you wouldn't mind putting a couple of ideas in the chat, what are some ideas that you have about what you need to know, what literacies you need to have access to in order to drive a car safely? Janelle says spatial awareness. So maybe being able to know how big your car is, how to get it from one place to another in a bunch of other cars, right? Nice. Reading, hold on, I want to scroll back down. Reading the traffic signs. So you need to understand how to read a traffic sign, what different signs mean. They even test us on this. I don't know what they do in the Carolinas, but in Michigan, you have to have a test on the different traffic signs. You need pretty good hand-eye coordination. Although we do have tools that we can put in your car. So that can help you. Like we now have many cameras that will help you with spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination, moving yourself from one place to another. Lane controls, right? If you're moving over to the right or to the left, the ability to read the gauges. You don't want to run out of gas or have your oil temperature go way up. Or in Michigan, this is the problem, right? The first cold day, what happens? Everybody's tires go on. The little tire thing goes on because science. The air has cooled down and there's not enough pressure in your tires anymore. Nice. So these are literacies that you need in everyday life, and they're vast. Like they come from a lot of different places. The hand-eye coordination. One of the things I was thinking is like being able to read a map. Maybe we don't unfold paper maps anymore, but we still have the map on the screen in the car. And I really don't I call her Sharon. I'm not a big fan of Sharon's talking at me, so I turn her off. So it makes it that I actually have to navigate by reading a map too. You also have to know which pedals to use for what purpose. What you didn't put there is that you didn't need to know how to fix the car. So there are, in fact, boundaries to the literacies that you need for the purposes of safely driving a car. Maybe you want to mark down when to get your oil changed, but you don't need to know how to change your oil, right? So I don't know if how that feels to you as far as like starting to develop a little bit of a understanding about the disciplinary literacies. But my friend thought it would be good to like focus on where we are in everyday life. So I did a little investigation of the disciplinary literacy work that's happening in states across the country. And as Charlene mentioned, Janelle and I have been, mostly Janelle. Janelle has allowed me to work with her on disciplinary literacy, and I hold up the science side in Michigan. And I'm working really hard to connect disciplinary literacy with science work that we're trying to do, which is mostly around next generation science developed curriculum materials. What I noticed when I was doing my survey of different disciplinary literacy projects across the states, I really recognize this pattern of focusing on reading and writing. Largely, it's disciplinary literacy is defined by those opportunities for kids to read and write. They're often focused on teacher-led literacy opportunities. So the reading might come from the teacher. The teacher might provide the kids in science an article, a research article, or a newspaper article to read that's aligned with the curriculum materials or with the experiences that they want. But the teacher initiated the literacy opportunity. Frequently, and I think this might be particular for science, but y'all can tell me whether that's true or not. It's focused on building science vocabulary. So a lot of work in vocabulary building and academic vocabulary. And throughout all of the documents, the word text is used predominantly, right? So it's either writing text or reading text, but the word text is very common in the documents that I read. So reading is text and writing is text, and maybe speaking and listening are a little bit of text also. So I wanted to ask you, when you think of text in science, what do you think? Like, what would you use? These are 3 questions that hit at about the same thing, but I wanted to frame it 3 different ways to see if that would help to give you some different ideas. So how do you define text in science? Or could you provide, maybe you don't have a definition, but what's a working definition that you might have? What counts as examples of text in science, particularly 612 science, but really all science? And if you wanted to, you could unmute or put notes in the chat on what you're thinking about. So lab reports is one option. So that would include writing, experiment notes, a little bit more writing. So we've got this idea of the kids doing an experiment, writing a lab report, taking notes while they're doing the experiment, learning the periodic table. Oh, it's Janelle. Scientific journals, right? So in the realm of the teacher providing an opportunity for reading text, or maybe the curriculum materials or the curriculum instructional resources that you use has some sort of a journal in there, like the journal aspect. Charlene, you want to say a little bit more about that? Are you talking about scientific journals?
Well, yes, but also maybe not so in depth as a higher ed person would need to read, but there's got to be some, like Rochelle says, scientific journals that would be friendly to the secondary ed experience.
Yep. Good.
So that
Okay.
they're reading authentic materials.
Nice. So really finding that space for some authentic scientific reading. Nice. Okay, cool. All right. So in Michigan, you have Janelle here, so you've probably seen all of these before, but I'm going to go back over them because then we're going to use the work that you just mentioned, the lab reports, periodic table, and so on, and a little bit of these essentials from Michigan and look at some actual curriculum material, a lesson, just one lesson from some recently published curriculum materials, and see how our ideas and the materials have some synergies, if they do, or if they don't, and we need to adjust in order to find spaces where they attach to each other. So in Michigan, we're focused on disciplinary literacy around problem-based instruction. That has a lot of definitions, and we get a little bit of pushback on this. I would argue that recently South Carolina standards also, right, are recently designed, and they really ask kids to do more focused, phenomenon-based instruction. So for science, I always frame this as phenomenon-based instruction. Janelle's nodding in agreement with that. And I think our science part of these essentials really does focus on that. We look for all kids should have opportunities to look at, read diverse texts and have abundant reading opportunities. Everything is standards aligned and intentional in reading and in writing. So that goes back to the survey that I did on other states, focused very much on reading and writing. And then we added in higher order discussion. So really, where do discussions come about? And in science, we would say discussions for the purposes of sense making. So how do we help teachers to engage kids in these discussions that really help students understand, explain the science, the phenomenon that they're investigating? We want kids to have opportunities for speaking and listening. Sometimes that's very light touch in other states' documents. Where you do want to build vocabulary, but I would argue that's not going to be the focus, right? So we're going to build vocabulary over time along with conceptual knowledge. Almost always in professional learning, I encourage teachers to not give kids the vocabulary words in advance and design definition sheets, but to learn the vocabulary in the context of their investigations of really exploring phenomena. We also add in opportunities for assessment, and these can certainly be formative assessment, right? Ongoing assessment that is formative in the classroom that we're doing on a minute-to-minute or session-to-session basis. We're working from funds of knowledge. This for number 9, and tapping into the community. So the community could be the community of the classroom, the community of the school. In Learning in Places and the other work that we're doing, we're starting to think of community much broader, so that it is out of the school itself, out into the community. And how do we bring in community funds of knowledge from elders, from people who do different jobs within the community, who can help us to learn and then explore and explain the phenomenon. And then my favorite is number 10, meta-discursive awareness, which teachers are not thrilled about a very long word. What does meta-discursive mean, right? So we're thinking about our talking, we're thinking about our writing. We've got this great library of resources for teachers. And the most challenging one to find really great resources for is meta-discursive awareness. We can give you articles from science education journals all day long for all of these other things. But when it comes to meta-discursive awareness, we have a paucity of work. That's a science, a research literacy word. But Janelle's not giving up. She says she's going to do it. All right. So what I thought we could do, we're doing great on time. So what I thought we could do is spend a little time looking at a lesson. So I picked 4 different, okay, hang on. Let me get you the links. If you wanted to look at it on your phone, you could use the QR code, or I can put the link in the chat. Oops, hang on, that was already open. Here we go. It should open up to a Google Doc that looks like this. Yes. and you should have access to it. The little vagaries of Google Docs. There we go. Excellent. So I included, well, you can have a copy of the Disciplinary Literacy Essentials from Michigan. Whoops. And then part of the NGSS we'll come back to. So I didn't know everybody who was going to be here and what their background was going to be. So I made sure that I had grade 6 through chemistry. So maybe we can certainly keep these links, and you can always look at them at any other time. But I'm thinking, since we're kind of a small group, maybe we should focus on one lesson that we all look at, rather than separating us up into multiple grades. And since we're probably not adept at chemistry, high school chemistry learning, anybody a chemist? Maybe we should shoot for the 6th grade lesson. Would that work? All right. So if you opened up, does everybody have the links? Excellent. So when you click on the link, it should bring you to a page that looks like this. There are many ways that we could tackle the challenges of looking for examples of disciplinary literacy in a lesson. One of the ways would be to start with the teacher's edition. So I thought that's what we should do. So we're going to open the teacher's edition, then I'm going to give you a little background on the materials. So this is a lesson from a 6th grade unit around light and matter, energy and matter. Nope. Yes. And I was right. And it's designed by a group called Open Syed. And this is at the moment one of only 2 middle school curricula that have been externally evaluated to have all green by Ed Reports. So one is Amplify and the other one is Open Syed. So by external reviews, by the Equip rubric and by Ed Reports, this curriculum has been identified as being of high quality. I did not write this curriculum. I have no skin in this game, although I'm pretty familiar with the lesson. So I thought we would look through this first lesson in the unit. And it's a multi-week unit. I think that it is 28 days or something like that. So all you're seeing is a tiny snapshot at the very beginning of the unit. So I'm interested in what kinds of examples of disciplinary literacy you're going to find as you skim through the unit. So you're probably going to want to go down. Don't get sick to your stomach as I scroll. The front matter of these units is pretty dense. So there's a lot of stuff in here that you'll be able to learn about the materials. There we go. So I guess it wasn't as far as I thought. If you scroll to page 8. So this is the teacher's edition just for lesson 1. So you won't see the teacher's edition for the rest of the unit. And I was imagining that we might take about 5 minutes, maybe 6 or 7, to look through each part of this first lesson for examples of what might come out to you as opportunities for students to engage in science disciplinary literacy. And you might keep in mind those essentials, the 10 essentials, and as well the focus on reading and writing text that we mentioned earlier. Is that enough of a beginning to get you started? Awesome. Okay. So usually the norm that we have in meetings that I'm in is that when we're reading, we turn off the camera. If you'd like to do that, you're welcome to. You're all muted. I'm going to mute, and I'm not going to stop sharing the screen because you never know if you'll get it back. So you're going to see my screen scroll because I'm going to read along with you also. And we'll come back at, it is 25 past the hour right now. Yes, 25 past the hour right now. And we'll come back at 31 past the hour. could just finish up what you're reading and come on back. So I was hoping we could have a little short discussion, although it might become a longer discussion because it seems to me that there's quite a few examples. Yeah, everybody should be in this class. It's a great class, right? So what did you see here? Let me ask a different question first. Is this the first time that you have seen a science lesson that is written aligned to the framework for K-12 science education and the 10-year-old now science standards? No, you're pretty familiar with it?
It's not my first time reading one of the Open SciEd lessons.
Okay, all right, cool. All right, so let's just walk through it. What were some of the examples that you saw of literacy? And I'll open up the lesson. And if you wanted to share the page number that you're looking at, I'll scroll to it. So we'll all be able to see what it is that you're talking about, what the example is.
Well, I'm happy to start.
Okay.
Right at the very top, where it's talking about the video that's going to be shown at the start of class.
Yep.
Obviously, you know, I'm connecting that with the first practice, that inquiry-based, phenomenon-based. So starting with the science, the thing that's worth investigating and making sense of with practice one. And I also, when students are asked to notice and wonder and jot that down, it made me think about both informal disciplinary writing, right?
Okay.
Like, you know, scientists may not be publishing notice and wonder jots, but that's very much something they do as part of their informal process. So this mirrors that, and that's our fourth practice, but it also serves as formative assessment for the teacher, which is our practice 8. So I'll just pause there. I saw lots more things, but I want to give other people a chance to share.
Okay. Thanks, Janelle. I really like, while everybody's gathering their strength and bravery to share their ideas, I want to point out, right, that we said that about journals, right, and about written sort of published papers in the text in science brainstorm that we had at the beginning of the session. And you've expanded it, Janelle, to include sort of the informal stuff, right? And certainly before the publication happened, there was a lot of informal writing that a scientist would have had to do. And probably they kept it in some sort of a notebooky space, whether that's digital or, you know, a paper notebook. You're more effective if you don't have papers scattered all over the desk, which is why I'm not going to show you my desktop at the moment, because it's kind of a mess. All right, so I gave you enough time to like gather up your thoughts. Who would like to go next?
I think what I like is that there is so much inquiry of doing what they're learning about and drawing and discussing it. And so when we look at these, especially towards, I guess this is page 12, to be able to see these drawings and they're doing this, but they're also sharing it, because part of science and experimentation and all of that is that we might have different results, and we want to discuss that and what does that mean. And I really like that piece.
So in this case, what you're pointing out on page 12 is individual, right? So the kids are given a moment, 5 minutes, to work individually to make their initial model. And then after this, they have an opportunity, which could be used as formative assessment. We would never use this initial model at the beginning of the unit as a summative assessment or any kind of a grade, right? So this would be their individual model. And then after that, after they get done writing that, there's always an opportunity to share. So the sharing leverages the writing, the text that the students created. So Janelle's not kidding. I've been pressing on this for a really long time, right? Student created models are a literacy in science. And in science, in school science, they're a literacy for learning. These are not, this is not in science world, this is not a picture of two people standing there where we're just drawing arrows. We're really trying to make sense of the phenomenon of this lesson by putting our ideas on paper. And this is not at all expected to be the right answer, right? The complete explanation, the scientific explanation for this phenomenon is actually going to take the kids the whole unit to figure out. This is the initial model. So we're going to build on this piece of text that the kids have created over the course of the rest of the many weeks of this unit, updating the model consistently. And in a lot of ways, this one example is very different from how we previously talked about reading, writing, speaking, and listening in science, right? Where it was mostly teacher-led and focused not on iteration, but on completion, right? So this modeling piece for me is a huge way. Okay, I'm going to be honest. When I was in graduate school a million trillion years ago, I literally was the teacher's assistant for a course called Reading and Writing in the Content Areas. And that's the kind of stuff that we were doing so many years ago. And so what I'm really trying to point out is the ways we're starting to bring kids to the center of the disciplinary learning, moving the teacher outside of it. And this is a really great example of that, is this modeling.
I also really love that as you move through the lesson, you see multiple participation structures. And granted, yes, this is a 6th grade lesson, but it could work just as easily in a high school course. And sometimes when I talk with secondary educators, they are maybe comfortable having a whole class conversation that they are leading and directing. Maybe occasionally they're comfortable having it be student directed. But when we start talking about multiple participation structures within the same lesson, that you can have a whole class conversation, small group conversation, partner conversations, they don't all have to be teacher led, and there's time for all of those. Sometimes they need to see a model of what that can look like. And I think that this gives a nice layout for what that can look like.
Nice, thank you. Another piece that this lesson provides to the students is not just the drawn model that we saw earlier in the lesson, but an actual physical model. We call it the box model of the video. So they have then a physical model that's at scale. So we try to also talk about scale. What things do you know that are scale models? That's disciplinary literacy in science, right? We talk about scale all the time. Big things, very, very big things, things that are very, very far away, very, very little things so small that even the strongest of tools make it impossible. They're impossible to see. We can only go on evidence that they exist, right? So scale is a very important part. And this is an introduction to scale models in the 6th grade. So the kids are going to build a model, they don't really build it. They use a scale model, a physical model that looks like this. That's on the video. I know you guys didn't get a chance to see the video, but you could look at it later, or the people who use the recording might stop and actually open that video up and actually look at it. Video is text, right? So it starts off from the jump. The lesson starts off with text right from the beginning. other examples of disciplinary literacy that you found in this one lesson? Oh, one comment was about the lesson slides. Yeah, I debated whether we should look at the teacher edition or at the slides. And I chose the teacher's edition, but maybe the slides would have been just as equal of an opportunity to find the examples of disciplinary literacy in. But what you wouldn't necessarily see in the slides is the point that Janelle brought up about the various structures for interacting, for kids to be individually writing, sharing with a partner, discussing in whole group.
I think just overall, it feels like the bulk of this lesson is an grade level appropriate apprenticeship into the scientific community, right? I think if you're only following step-by-step lab instructions that the teacher has given you with pre-prepared and pre-organized materials that every group is using, I don't know that that gives the same feeling as having to figure something out for yourself and making sense of it. And navigating the complexity of something. There are very few things in science that are so neat and clean, and so when it's presented to students that way, especially I think if they see themselves as quote unquote good students and they don't automatically understand this complex thing, then it's easy for them to say, well, science must not be for me.
So you've uncovered a bunch of the challenges of these kind of materials, right? This unit is going to take multiple weeks for the kids to explain how room A and room B work and why it is that you can sometimes see through the glass, through what looks like a mirror. Sometimes you can see through it. It's a one-way mirror, right? And sometimes you cannot. Sometimes it looks like a mirror. Sometimes it looks like a window. Getting kids to persevere and to continue to investigate has been very challenging. They often, and this might be unique to science, want even in 6th grade, the limited elementary science they have had has largely been, we're going to tell you the answer. And so they run out of gas when you ask them to continue to investigate over the course of many days, many weeks. That's been a real challenge, and a lot of teachers are concerned about that and mention it in professional learning. I want to show you a bit that we have that Open SciEd includes. Oh, hang on, I need to not use that one in the lessons. And it's funny because it's a great way of showing kids how one thing connects to another, how this lesson is coherent, internally coherent. And often teachers will skip the parts that do that work. And part of that is because we're not used to it either. Teachers are not used to it either. And it's these bits called navigation. So the Open SciEd says to the teacher, okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit. And so we need you to introduce this slightly different idea to the kids. And in doing so, connect it to what you just did and then to what's about to come. And it's these, I think about them as like keystones in the lesson. It's really the part that holds the front and the back, or the yesterday and today together, yesterday and tomorrow together. And we're just not used to teaching that way. So it builds that the opportunities for the kids to see the coherence when we use those navigation routines, when we help the kids see that we really are doing the same investigating the same phenomenon for over these weeks, just from different angles.
It's interesting to hear about the perseverance thing. I think we hear that in other content areas as well. That there is some struggle. So we're having conversations about productive struggle in other secondary spaces. And I typically say if there isn't any sign of struggle, then we're probably not asking students to do the kinds of rigorous thinking that they should be doing at their grade level.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think we teach, it's our own fault. It's super our own fault. We teach kids that if you sit long enough, we will in fact give you the answer. We will do it. They can wait us out because they know time is on their side. We can't wait forever. So we work really hard in 6th grade to start to shift that. And what we have, Open SciEd is so new. And what we haven't really seen yet is very experienced teachers teaching multiple years in a row, right? So in a very experienced 6th grade teacher, and then those 6th graders move to 7th and to 8th. We haven't seen that trajectory yet and how 8th graders are different than they would have been 6 years ago. It literally takes us about 3 years to feel super confident with the instructional materials. And then it would take another 3 years or so for the kids to end up in 8th grade all the way to finish middle school. And we haven't quite gotten there yet. We're getting close. So it would be interesting to see how that works out. The scientist circle is awesome. Kids sit literally in a circle. We encourage teachers. They don't have to sit. They can stand. We can have a scientist circle. That's a standing meeting. These should not last forever. They should be like 10, 15 minutes in and out. Most kids can stand, make accommodations for kids who can't, and you're good to go. Because the reason to not do scientist circles is that we don't have space in the classroom to make a circle, but we can physically stand up and make a circle. The lovely part is that kids get to see each other. They get to be respectful in the discussion. They get to listen to each other's answers and ask each other questions, right? We want to make sure that we're also using the asking of questions. Is it okay if I keep going then? All right. So in the framework for K-12 science education, 8 science and engineering practices were defined. And in my thinking, these are disciplinary literacy practices, right? This is what defines and by using these 8 practices is how we start to apprentice kids into the ideas of science, into the ways of doing science. And what we have, unfortunately, a lot of science people have stopped with the 7th practice, obtain, evaluate, and communicate information, because it's the obvious one, right? It's the one most closely connected with reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So it's easy. That's easy. That's like easy peasy lemon squeezy. We got that. But the bigger, broader ideas of science are also included in asking questions and defining problems, which require some forms of communication. It doesn't have to necessarily be your voice, right? We're working really hard to help teachers see gestures as a way of communicating disciplinary literacy. They're age appropriate. What kinds of gestures would you make in order to explain different phenomena? So in the fact of the lesson we looked at, we work with teachers to think about that mirror. And sometimes the mirror is a window where the light goes right through, right? And sometimes the mirror is a mirror. The glass pane is a mirror where light doesn't go through, it actually bounces off. And how can we use gestures as part of disciplinary literacy? I think that's a space that we have not fully investigated. We're still a little stuck in the formalities of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And we're working especially with elementary teachers on how different kinds of communication can help them both assess students and help students, particularly those who don't necessarily have words yet, but have ideas that they haven't figured out how to express. How can they work their gestures and their speech together? So these rest of these science and engineering practices, you saw a bunch of them, developing and using models, planning and carrying out investigations. You didn't see interpreting data, but this is lesson 1. We wouldn't expect that. We did, of course, the asking questions. So that you saw the notice, the wonderings, that's around the asking questions bit. And then these other pieces, analyzing, interpreting data, constructing explanations, engaging in argument from evidence, those are going to come later in the unit. So those are disciplinary literacy opportunities that are going to be later in the unit, because we don't expect kids to construct a complete explanation at the beginning of the unit, right? We're going to do initial models. That's our first baby step towards it. And then using mathematics and computational thinking, that's not in this unit. That's just not a light matter. It's just not really something. There's going to be a little bit of reading a meter, a light meter, but that's not really what that practice actually means. So I would not include that in that practice. Then, just to make things more interesting, in the framework for K-12 science education, we identified 7 cross-cutting concepts. And this is a space where a lot of work still needs to get done in disciplinary literacy, because we got happy with obtain, evaluate, and communicate information. And we were like, yes, we got this. And I'm here to tell you, the cross-cutting concepts are the ideas that blend all of science together. So if school science is wackadoo, we decided that we got to have biology in one year, chemistry in another year, and physics in another year. And the world doesn't work that way. Explaining science phenomenon does not work that way. And the practices the cross-cutting concept help us to see how chemistry, biology, and physics blend together. And they go across K-12. All of the practices and the cross-cutting concepts, we expect kids to be using them from kindergarten all the way through to whatever their terminal course is in science in high school. And I really feel like there's opportunities for us to think about disciplinary literacy with the cross-cutting concepts, what that looks like, how kids use the language, for example, of cause and effect, how they show patterns, both in models and in data. What do systems and system models look like? How do we talk about them? How do we communicate what we're thinking and changes in our models over time? All of these things, I feel like the science education world and probably the disciplinary literacy world still has a long way to go in figuring out how we embed the cross-cutting concepts into disciplinary literacy learning. Yeah, I think that's right, Janelle. They're similar to ideas that you might see in IB programs. And we honestly, I feel really strongly that we've got this. We think that the practices, we've got them all wrapped up. We know what we're doing. And then we come over here, and this is a third dimension. We should not leave this alone. This is a very important part of how science gets done. All right. That was what I had planned for this evening. So I hope that met the criteria that you were expecting.
Oh my goodness, this was amazing.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Charlie, go
Absolutely.
ahead.
Good.
No, I was just going to say absolutely everything that I was expecting. So thank
Good.
you so much for
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
sharing.
Thank you for making me put my ideas on paper.
for perpetuity. We are